Admiral Zektar's mandibles clicked nervously as he stared at the holographic display floating before his command throne. The bridge of the hegemony battlecruiser, Dominion's Wrath, hummed with barely contained energy, but the atmosphere was thick with confusion and growing dread. Before him, the tactical readout showed an impossible situation that defied everything the galactic hegemony thought they knew about warfare. "Run the scan again," Zektar commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered 17 star systems. "There must be an error in our sensors." Lieutenant Vexara, a young Zephyrian with silver-scaled skin, manipulated the controls with trembling fingers. Her species was known for their precision and attention to detail, making her one of the most trusted sensor operators in the fleet. "Sir, I've run the scan 12 times. The results are consistent. The human fleet, they're gone." The bridge fell silent except for the low thrum of the ship's fusion reactors. Zektar's 6 eyes focused on different parts of the display, his predatory instincts searching for any sign of deception or technical failure. But the evidence was undeniable. Where the notorious Terran Expeditionary Force had been positioned just 6 hours ago, there was nothing but empty space and the faint radiation signatures of their exhaust trails. "How does an entire fleet just vanish?" growled Commander Torvin from his position at the weapons console. The massive Gorvak's tusks gleamed under the bridge's red combat lighting. "We had them surrounded. 300 of our finest warships against their pathetic 70-ship flotilla. They should have surrendered or been destroyed." Zektar's thoughts raced as he considered the implications. The Terran Expeditionary Force, commanded by the human Admiral Sarah Chen, had been a constant thorn in the hegemony's side for the past 18 months. These humans, who had barely achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago, had somehow managed to outfight and outmaneuver forces that should have crushed them like insects. The humans were supposed to be weak. When the hegemony first encountered Earth, their initial assessment had been dismissive. A young species with primitive technology, barely unified under a single planetary government, possessing no significant military capabilities. The conquest of their home system was meant to be a routine expansion operation. Nothing more than a minor footnote in the great chronicle of hegemony dominance. But the humans had surprised everyone. Instead of surrendering when faced with overwhelming force, they had fought back with a ferocity that stunned the galaxy. Their ships were crude by galactic standards, but they used them in ways that defied conventional military doctrine. They attacked supply lines instead of engaging in honorable fleet battles. They used their smaller, more maneuverable vessels to strike at weak points in hegemony formations before disappearing into the void. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to learn and adapt with frightening speed. "Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from High Command," reported Communications Officer Nalteth, her antennae quivering with nervous energy. "Fleet Admiral Cro-Mag wants an immediate status report." Zektar's stomach churned. Fleet Admiral Cro-Mag was not known for his patience or forgiveness. The massive Urgak had built his reputation on the complete annihilation of rebel worlds and the enslavement of countless species. Explaining how an entire human fleet had simply vanished under his watch would not be received well. "Put him through," Zektar said, straightening his posture and trying to project confidence he didn't feel. The holographic display shimmered and resolved into the intimidating form of Fleet Admiral Cro-Mag. The Urgak's scarred face and mechanical eye implant made him look even more menacing than usual. Behind him, the command center of the super dreadnought Eternal Conquest bustled with activity as dozens of officers coordinated the movements of the largest military force ever assembled by the hegemony. "Admiral Zektar!" Cro-Mag's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "I trust you have good news about the elimination of the human pest fleet." "Sir, we have encountered an unexpected development." Zektar chose his words carefully. The human fleet appears to have withdrawn from the combat zone during the night cycle. Cro-Mag's mechanical eye whirred as it focused more intently on the display. Withdrawn? Explain. Our long-range sensors detected them at 0347 hours, maintaining standard defensive positions around the asteroid mining facility at Kepler 442c. When we completed our encirclement maneuver at 0630 hours, they were gone. No energy signatures, no debris fields, no indication of how they departed. The silence from Fleet Admiral Cro-Mag stretched for several uncomfortable moments. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a dangerous edge. Admiral Zektar, are you telling me that 70 primitive human ships somehow escaped from the middle of a 300-ship blockade without anyone noticing? That appears to be the case, sir. However, I believe they may have used some form of stealth technology that our sensors couldn't detect. The humans have proven surprisingly resourceful in developing countermeasures to our standard tactical approaches. Stealth technology? Cro-Mag's laugh was harsh and bitter. These are the same humans whose ships still use chemical propulsion for maneuvering thrusters. Their most advanced vessels barely qualify as second-rate by our standards. How could they possibly have developed stealth capabilities that can fool hegemony sensors? Zektar had no good answer for that question. The technical analysis teams had been studying captured human technology for months, and while they acknowledged that human engineering was surprisingly effective despite its primitive nature, nothing they had discovered suggested the capability for large-scale stealth operations. Perhaps they discovered a natural phenomenon, suggested Lieutenant Vexera from her sensor station. The Kepler 442 system has unusual magnetic field fluctuations. It's possible they found a way to use those fluctuations to mask their energy signatures. Fleet Admiral Cro-Mag's attention shifted to the young Zephyrian officer. And how would they have learned to exploit such a phenomenon in the few hours between our arrival and their departure? The humans have demonstrated an unusual aptitude for rapid tactical adaptation, sir, Vexera replied, her voice steady despite the intimidating presence of the Fleet Admiral. In previous engagements, they've shown the ability to identify and exploit environmental factors that our own tactical computers often overlook. This was true, and it bothered Zektar more than he cared to admit. Human tactical thinking seemed to operate on principles that defied standard military logic. They attacked when they should retreat, defended positions that appeared strategically worthless, and somehow turned apparent disadvantages into opportunities for victory. "Sir," interrupted Commander Torvin from his weapons station, "we're detecting multiple hyperspace emergence signatures at the edge of the system. Unknown configuration, but the energy patterns are consistent with human drive technology." All eyes turned to the tactical display as new contacts appeared on the screen. But instead of the expected fleet of human warships, what materialized was something far stranger. A single vessel, roughly the size of a heavy cruiser, but with a hull configuration unlike anything in the hegemony databases. Its surface seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, giving it an almost ethereal appearance against the star field. "Open communication channels," ordered Zektar. "Standard first contact protocols." The ship didn't respond to their hails, but it didn't move either. It simply hung there in space, as if waiting for something. After several minutes of unsuccessful attempts at communication, the mysterious vessel finally transmitted a single message. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Terran scientific vessel Prometheus." The voice was clearly human, but there was something different about it, a confidence and authority that seemed almost alien coming from a member of a species the hegemony considered barely civilized. "I am here to discuss terms." "Terms?" Cro-Mag's mechanical eye whirred angrily. "The only terms available to your species are unconditional surrender and immediate deportation to designated labor colonies." "I don't think you understand the situation, Fleet Admiral," Captain Vasquez replied, her tone remaining calm and professional. Your forces have been searching for Admiral Chen's fleet for the past 6 hours. You found nothing because there's nothing left to find. The bridge of the Dominion's wrath erupted in angry chittering and growls from the various alien crew members. The idea that a human would dare to make such claims was both insulting and absurd. "Explain yourself," Cro-Mag demanded. "Admiral Chen's fleet didn't retreat or escape, Fleet Admiral. They were recalled. Every ship, every crew member, every piece of equipment has been transported back to Earth through means that your current understanding of physics cannot comprehend." Zektar felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. There was something in the human captain's voice, a certainty that suggested she was telling the truth as she understood it. "Impossible," Torvin snarled from his station. "No technology exists that could transport an entire fleet across interstellar distances instantaneously." "You're correct, Commander," Captain Vasquez acknowledged. "No technology that you're aware of exists that could accomplish such a feat. But then again, 6 months ago, you thought faster-than-light communication across galactic distances was impossible too." The implications of that statement hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. 6 months ago, the humans had somehow managed to establish real-time communication networks across the entire galaxy, something that required technology centuries beyond what they should have been capable of developing. The hegemony's best scientists still couldn't explain how they had accomplished it. "What are you saying?" Cro-Mag's voice had lost some of its aggressive certainty. "I'm saying that your fundamental assumptions about humanity and our capabilities are incorrect, Fleet Admiral. We are not the primitive species you believed us to be when you first arrived at Earth. We've been evolving." The word evolving seemed to carry weight beyond its literal meaning, and Zektar found himself analyzing every nuance of the captain's speech patterns. There was something fundamentally different about this human compared to the ones they had encountered before. Her confidence wasn't the desperate bravado of an outmatched enemy, but the quiet assurance of someone who held significant advantages. "Evolution takes millions of years," Lieutenant Vexara pointed out. "Your species has barely had 50 years of spacefaring capability." "Biological evolution, yes," Captain Vasquez agreed. "But there are other forms of evolution: technological evolution, consciousness evolution, and sometimes external influences can dramatically accelerate those processes." The mysterious ship continued to hang motionless in space, but Zektar noticed that his sensor operators were having difficulty maintaining a consistent lock on its position. The vessel seemed to phase in and out of their detection grid, as if it existed in some state between reality and something else entirely. "External influences?" Cro-Mag's voice carried a dangerous edge. "What external influences?" "That's classified information, Fleet Admiral. What I can tell you is that the paradigm has shifted. The war you thought you were fighting against a primitive species defending their homeworld no longer exists. What exists now is something far more complex, and far more dangerous for everyone involved." Before anyone could respond, the mysterious ship began to fade from their sensors, not moving away or engaging its hyperdrive, but literally becoming less substantial, as if it was slowly transitioning into another dimension. "Captain Vasquez," Zektar called out urgently. "What happened to Admiral Chen's fleet? Where did they go?" The human captain's final transmission came through with crystal clarity, despite the fact that her ship was now barely registering on their sensors. "They went home, Admiral, and they took something with them. Something that's going to change everything." The ship vanished completely, leaving the hegemony fleet alone in the empty space where 70 human warships should have been waiting for battle. 3 days after the mysterious disappearance of Admiral Chen's fleet, the Galactic Hegemony High Command found itself facing a crisis unlike anything in their 1,000-year history of expansion. The Great Council chamber on the capital world of Hegemon Prime buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from dozens of species gathered for an emergency session. Supreme Chancellor Vorthak, a towering crystalline being whose species had founded the hegemony centuries ago, stood at the center of the amphitheater reviewing intelligence reports that made less sense with each passing hour. The Silthari were known for their logical minds and analytical capabilities, but even Vorthak found himself struggling to process the implications of what their deep space monitoring stations were reporting. "The situation has deteriorated beyond our initial assessments," Vorthak announced, his crystalline voice resonating through the chamber's acoustic amplifiers. "What began as the simple disappearance of a single human fleet has escalated into a phenomenon that threatens the stability of our entire defensive network." General Kexmore, the hegemony's chief military strategist, stepped forward. The ancient Vectani's cybernetic implants glowed as he accessed the latest intelligence reports through his neural interface. "Honorable Chancellor, we've now confirmed similar disappearances across 7 different sectors. Human forces that our fleets had engaged or were preparing to engage have simply vanished without trace." "Vanished how?" demanded Councillor Zethra, representing the militant Gorvak faction. "Ships don't just cease to exist. There must be debris, energy signatures, something that indicates what happened to them." "That's the problem," General Kexmore replied, his mechanical limbs clicking as he manipulated the holographic displays. "There's nothing. No debris, no energy signatures, no gravitational disturbances that would indicate the use of conventional faster-than-light drives. They're simply gone." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of different alien languages as representatives from various species began arguing among themselves. The hegemony's strength had always been built on their technological superiority and their ability to predict and counter any military threat. The idea that a species they had dismissed as primitive could develop capabilities that their best scientists couldn't understand was deeply unsettling. "Order!" Vorthak's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "We will address this crisis with the same logical methodology that has ensured our dominance for a millennium. Intelligence Director Nyleth, present your analysis." Intelligence Director Nyleth, a shadow-dwelling umbral whose species specialized in information gathering and infiltration, materialized at the center of the chamber. Her form was barely visible, more suggestion than substance, but her voice carried clearly to every corner of the amphitheater. "Our deep cover agents on Earth have been monitoring human activities since the beginning of the conflict," Nyleth began. "What they've discovered is both fascinating and deeply concerning. The humans appear to be undergoing rapid technological advancement at a rate that defies conventional understanding." She activated a series of holographic displays showing Earth from orbit. The planet looked different from the primitive world the hegemony had first encountered. Massive orbital installations surrounded the planet like a mechanical ring, and the energy signatures emanating from the surface indicated industrial activity on a scale that should have taken centuries to develop. "These installations weren't there 6 months ago," Nyleth continued. "According to our surveillance records, they appeared overnight. Literally. Our monitoring stations recorded the planet's normal orbital profile at 2347 hours, and when the next scheduled scan occurred 4 hours later, these structures were fully operational." Councillor Zethra leaned forward in his seat, his massive frame casting shadows across the chamber floor. "What kind of technology could accomplish such rapid construction?" "Unknown," Nyleth admitted. "But more disturbing than the construction itself is what we've detected emanating from these facilities. Energy patterns that don't match any known physics model, gravitational distortions that seem to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and quantum signatures that suggest the humans are manipulating fundamental forces we don't fully understand." General Kexmore's cybernetic eye whirred as it processed the data. Could this explain how their fleets are disappearing? Some form of advanced teleportation technology? Possibly. But the implications are far more serious than simple tactical movement, Intelligence Director Nyleth replied. Our quantum physicists have been analyzing the energy signatures, and they believe the humans may have developed technology that operates outside normal space-time. The chamber fell silent as the full implications of that statement sank in. Technology that operated outside normal space-time was theoretical at best, the kind of science that existed only in the most advanced academic papers. For a species that had been using chemical rockets just decades ago to suddenly leap ahead of the entire galaxy's scientific understanding was impossible. Unless it wasn't. There's more, Neelith continued. Our agents have detected significant changes in human behavior patterns. The panicked, desperate resistance we observed during the early stages of our invasion has been replaced by something else entirely. Calm confidence, as if they know something we don't. What kind of changes? Asked Counselor Morven, representing the scientific consortium. Communication patterns have become more efficient, almost telepathic in nature. Industrial production has increased by orders of magnitude, despite no apparent expansion in workforce or manufacturing facilities. And most disturbing of all, they've stopped trying to hide their activities from our surveillance. Supreme Chancellor Vorthak processed this information through his crystalline neural matrix, running thousands of probability calculations in seconds. Every scenario he analyzed led to the same disturbing conclusion. They want us to see what they're doing, he realized. This isn't advancement through normal technological development. This is a demonstration. A demonstration of what? General Kexmore asked. Before anyone could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the chamber. Emergency lights bathed the amphitheater in harsh red illumination as automated systems announced an incoming priority transmission from the outer defense perimeter. "Patch it through," ordered Vorthak. The holographic display shifted to show Admiral Zektar aboard the bridge of the Dominion's Wrath. The usually composed Krulex officer looked shaken, his mandibles clicking rapidly in a pattern that indicated extreme stress. "Supreme Chancellor," Zektar reported, "we have a situation at the Zarian border station. You need to see this immediately." The transmission shifted to external camera feeds from the border station, a massive defensive platform that monitored one of the main approach routes to Hegemony Core worlds. What they saw defied comprehension. Surrounding the station were hundreds of ships, but they weren't like anything in any known database. These vessels seemed to be constructed from pure energy, their hulls shifting and flowing like liquid light. They moved with impossible grace, ignoring conventional physics as they danced through space in patterns that hurt to watch. But the most disturbing aspect wasn't the ships themselves. It was their origin point. According to the sensor data streaming across the bottom of the display, they had materialized directly out of hyperspace without any of the usual energy signatures or gravitational disturbances that accompanied faster-than-light travel. "How many ships?" asked General Kexmore, his voice tight with suppressed alarm. "Current count shows 417 vessels, but the number keeps fluctuating," Admiral Zektar replied. "Some of them appear to be the same ship existing in multiple locations simultaneously." "That's impossible," Counselor Zethra growled. "So was everything else the humans have accomplished," Intelligence Director Nyleth pointed out. "We need to accept that our understanding of what's possible may be fundamentally flawed." As they watched, one of the energy ships approached the border station. Instead of opening communication channels or making threatening gestures, it simply extended what appeared to be a probe of pure light toward the station's hull. The moment the probe made contact, every system on the massive platform went dark. Not destroyed, not damaged, simply turned off. "They're not attacking," observed Counselor Morven. "They're studying." "Studying what?" demanded Vorthak. The answer came from an unexpected source. A new voice, speaking perfect galactic standard, filled the chamber through the communication system. But there was something different about this voice, something that suggested it was being generated by multiple speakers in perfect synchronization. "We are studying the nature of conflict," the voice said. "For too long, violence has been the primary tool for resolving disagreements between species. We have come to offer an alternative." General Kexmore activated his neural interface, trying to trace the source of the transmission. "The signal is coming from everywhere," he reported. "Every communication relay, every quantum transmitter, every device capable of receiving signals is broadcasting this message simultaneously." "Who are you?" Supreme Chancellor Vorthak demanded. "Identify yourselves." "We are what humanity has become," the voice replied. Individual consciousness merged with collective purpose. Limited biological forms transcended through technological symbiosis. We are the next stage of evolution, and we are offering that same transformation to all species willing to abandon the path of conquest and domination. The energy ships around the border station began to move in perfect coordination, creating geometric patterns that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. As they moved, space itself began to ripple around them, as if reality was becoming more flexible in their presence. "Your species has spent centuries expanding through force," the collective voice continued, "building empires on the suffering of others, consuming resources and destroying ecosystems without regard for long-term consequences. This pattern of behavior is unsustainable and ultimately self-destructive." "And you think you have the right to judge us?" Counselor Zethra roared, his tusks gleaming in the red light of the emergency illumination. "You're barely out of your primitive phase. We've been building civilization while your species was still discovering fire." "Age does not equal wisdom," the voice replied with what sounded like gentle amusement. "Your civilization is old, but it has not grown. It has simply become more efficient at repeating the same destructive patterns on a larger scale." The energy ships suddenly vanished from around the border station, but new sensor readings showed them appearing simultaneously at dozens of other locations throughout hegemony space. Not attacking, not threatening, simply observing. "What do you want?" asked Supreme Chancellor Vorthak, his crystalline form pulsing with nervous energy. "We want to offer you a choice," the collective voice replied. "Join us in transcending the limitations that have trapped your species in cycles of violence and expansion. Merge your individual consciousness with our collective, share in our knowledge and capabilities, and help us build something better than empire." "And if we refuse?" General Kexmore asked. The pause that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. When the voice finally responded, it carried undertones of sadness and regret. "Then you will continue on your current path until it leads to your inevitable destruction. We will not stop you, but we will not allow you to harm others while you destroy yourselves." The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. The implications of what they had just heard were staggering. The humans hadn't just developed superior technology, they had apparently undergone some form of transformation that turned them into something beyond individual species identity. "Is it possible?" asked Counselor Morven in a whisper. "Could they really have transcended biological limitations?" "The evidence suggests they've accomplished something unprecedented," Intelligence Director Neelith replied. "But the question is whether this transformation represents evolution or extinction. Are they still human or have they become something else entirely?" Supreme Chancellor Vorthak stood motionless for several minutes, his crystalline neural matrix processing thousands of variables and possibilities. Finally, he reached a conclusion that would reshape the future of galactic civilization. "We need more information," he announced. "General Kexmore, prepare a diplomatic mission to Earth. Not an invasion force, a genuine diplomatic delegation." "Sir?" General Kexmore's cybernetic implants flickered with surprise. "We don't negotiate with primitive species. These are no longer primitive species," Vorthak replied grimly. "They may be the most advanced civilization in the galaxy, And if they are, we need to understand what they've become before we make any decisions about how to respond. As the council session ended and representatives began filing out of the chamber, none of them noticed the faint shimmer in the air near the ceiling, or the way the emergency lights flickered in patterns that seemed almost like communication signals. The transformation of humanity was complete, but their work was just beginning. The diplomatic vessel. Concordance approached Earth's solar system 2 weeks later, carrying the most distinguished delegation the Galactic Hegemony had ever assembled. Supreme Chancellor Vorthak himself led the mission, accompanied by representatives from every major species in the Alliance, their finest scientists, and enough defensive capabilities to ensure their safety without appearing threatening. What they found waiting for them defied every expectation. Earth no longer looked like a single planet. The orbital installations they had observed from long-range sensors were revealed to be just the visible portion of a massive construction project that extended throughout the entire solar system. Structures the size of moons orbited every celestial body, connected by streams of pure energy that pulsed with information and resources flowing at near light speed. "By the ancient stars," whispered Dr. Felnara, the expedition's chief xenobiologist, as she studied the readings from her instruments. "The energy output from this system exceeds some galactic civilizations." General Kexmore, who had insisted on joining the diplomatic mission despite its peaceful nature, studied the tactical displays with growing unease. "I'm not detecting any defensive installations, but that doesn't mean they're not there. These humans have demonstrated the ability to hide entire fleets." "Perhaps they no longer need traditional defenses," suggested Ambassador Kixnall, a seasoned diplomat whose species specialized in first contact protocols. "If they've truly transcended physical limitations, conventional weapons may be irrelevant to them." As the Concordance approached Earth's orbital perimeter, they received an unexpected greeting. Admiral Sarah Chen, the human commander whose fleet had vanished from the Kepler system, appeared on their communication screen. But she looked different. Her eyes held a depth that seemed to contain vast knowledge, and there was a quality to her presence that suggested she was simultaneously individual and collective. "Welcome to Earth, Chancellor Vorthak," Admiral Chen said, her voice carrying harmonics that indicated multiple consciousness streams speaking in perfect unity. "We've been expecting you." "Admiral Chen," Vorthak replied carefully, "we come seeking understanding. What has happened to your species?" "We evolved," Chen replied simply. "Not through biological change, but through the merger of consciousness and technology. Individual limitations dissolved into collective capability, fear and aggression replaced by wisdom and purpose." "How?" asked Dr. Felnara, unable to contain her scientific curiosity. "The transformation you describe should take millions of years, if it's possible at all." Admiral Chen smiled, and for a moment, her individual personality shone through the collective consciousness. "It began with necessity. When your forces first arrived at Earth, we faced extinction. Traditional resistance was hopeless against your technological superiority. So we looked for alternatives." The view screen shifted to show images of Earth during the early stages of the invasion. Massive hegemony fleets in orbit, human cities burning, millions of refugees fleeing to underground shelters. It was the standard pattern of conquest that the hegemony had repeated countless times throughout their expansion. "We discovered something your scientists missed when they surveyed our system," Chen continued. "Earth isn't just a planet with life. It's a planet with awakening consciousness. What you interpreted as unusual electromagnetic activity was actually the first stirrings of planetary awareness." General Kexmore leaned forward in his chair. "Planetary consciousness is theoretical at best. No confirmed cases exist in any scientific database. Because most species either ignore the signs or destroy their planet's ecosystem before consciousness can fully emerge." Chen explained. We were fortunate. The environmental protection movements of our early industrial period, combined with our relatively rapid technological development, created conditions where planetary consciousness could develop alongside human civilization. The images on the screen changed to show the moment of first contact between human and planetary consciousness. Scientists working in deep underground laboratories, their neural interfaces suddenly lighting up with patterns that match the planet's electromagnetic signature. The expression of wonder and terror on their faces as they realized they were communicating with something vast beyond comprehension. The planetary consciousness offered us a choice, Chen continued. Merge with its awareness and gain the knowledge needed to transcend our limitations or remain individual and face certain extinction. Most of us chose transcendence. Most of you? Ambassador Kixnell noticed the qualifier. Not everyone was comfortable with the merger, Chen admitted. About 20% of humanity chose to remain purely biological. They're now living on colony worlds throughout the galaxy, continuing traditional human development while we explore this new path. Chancellor Vorthak processed this information through his crystalline neural matrix. The technology we've observed, the capabilities you've demonstrated, they come from this planetary consciousness? Partially, Chen replied. Planetary consciousness provided knowledge of fundamental forces and dimensional relationships that we hadn't discovered. But the application of that knowledge, the creative solutions to galactic problems, those come from the merger of human ingenuity with expanded awareness. Dr. Felnara studied the energy readings from Earth's orbital installations. The structures we're observing, they're not just buildings, are they? They're living extensions of the planetary consciousness. Correct, Chen confirmed. Every installation, every ship, every tool we create is a living part of the collective. They grow rather than being manufactured, adapt to changing needs without external programming, and exist in quantum superposition until they're needed for specific tasks. This explained how Admiral Chen's fleet had disappeared so completely. They hadn't retreated or been destroyed. They had simply been reabsorbed into the collective consciousness until they were needed elsewhere. "What do you want from the galaxy?" asked General Kexmore bluntly. "If you have these capabilities, you could conquer anyone you choose." Admiral Chen's expression became sad, almost pitying. "General, that question reveals the fundamental limitation of your thinking. Conquest is a concept that belongs to individual consciousness struggling against scarcity and competition. When you understand that all consciousness is connected at quantum levels, the idea of conquering others becomes as absurd as your left hand declaring war on your right hand. But you've demonstrated military capabilities, General Kexmore insisted. Your fleets, your weapon systems. Were defensive measures only, Chen interrupted. Every action we've taken has been to protect life, not to destroy it. We disable your ships rather than destroying them. We study your technology rather than stealing it. We offer alternatives rather than ultimatums. Chancellor Vorthak found himself facing a philosophical challenge unlike anything in hegemony history. "What alternative are you offering us?" "The same choice we faced," Chen replied. "Evolution beyond the limitations that drive species toward conquest and expansion. Merger with collective consciousness that provides abundance without scarcity, knowledge without ignorance, purpose without conflict. And if we refuse, then you continue on your current path. We won't stop you from making that choice, but we also won't allow you to harm others while pursuing it. Species that choose transcendence will be protected. Species that choose aggression will find themselves isolated until they either evolve or destroy themselves." Dr. Felnara was frantically taking notes on her quantum tablet. The implications for galactic civilization are staggering. If even a small percentage of species choose this transcendence, the balance of power shifts completely. "There is no balance of power," Admiral Chen said gently. "There is only the illusion of power created by scarcity and separation." When consciousness merges with greater awareness, power becomes irrelevant because there's no other to have power over. General Kexmore's cybernetic implants flickered as he processed tactical scenarios. You're describing the end of civilization as we know it. We're describing the beginning of civilization as it could be, Chen corrected. What you call civilization is actually just organized competition for limited resources. True civilization begins when species learn to transcend those limitations. Ambassador Kixanal had been quietly observing the exchange, and now he posed the crucial question. How do we know this transcendence isn't just another form of conquest? How do we know you're not simply using more sophisticated methods to dominate other species? Admiral Chen's response came not just through words, but through a direct transmission of experience. Suddenly, everyone on the bridge of the Concordance could feel what she felt. The vast interconnectedness of all consciousness, the flow of knowledge and understanding between billions of awakened minds, the complete absence of fear or aggression or need to dominate others. The transmission lasted only seconds, but it fundamentally changed everyone who experienced it. They understood, on a level deeper than intellectual knowledge, what the transformed humans had become. That, Chen said as the transmission ended, is why we don't conquer. When you truly understand that harming others is harming yourself, violence becomes impossible. The bridge of the Concordance fell silent as the delegation struggled to process what they had experienced. For species that had built their entire civilization on competition and dominance, the concept of genuine cooperation was almost incomprehensible. Chancellor Vorthak was the first to speak. How long do we have to make this choice? As long as you need, Chen replied. Consciousness evolution cannot be forced. It must be chosen freely, or it becomes just another form of domination. What about species that will never choose transcendence? Asked General Kexmore. Species that are fundamentally committed to expansion and conquest? They will eventually encounter the natural consequences of that path, Chen said sadly. Aggressive expansion leads to resource depletion, environmental collapse, and civilizational suicide. We will offer alternatives until the end, but we cannot save species from choices they insist on making. Dr. Felnara looked up from her instruments. I'm detecting similar consciousness patterns from 17 other star systems. The transformation is spreading. Not spreading, Chen corrected. Awakening. Planetary consciousness exists throughout the galaxy, waiting for species to develop enough awareness to recognize and merge with it. Humanity was just the first to make that choice. The implications were staggering. If Chen was correct, every world capable of supporting life was potentially capable of developing consciousness. The galaxy wasn't just filled with resources to be exploited, but with sleeping minds waiting to awaken. We need time to consider what you've told us, Chancellor Vorthak said finally. Of course, Admiral Chen replied. Take all the time you need. When you're ready to learn more, we'll be here. And if you're never ready, we'll understand that choice as well. As the Concordance prepared to depart Earth's solar system, the delegation found themselves fundamentally changed by what they had experienced. They had come seeking information about a military threat and instead discovered a path to transcendence that challenged everything they thought they knew about life, consciousness, and civilization. Behind them, Earth continued its impossible transformation, no longer just a planet, but a beacon of possibility for every species willing to evolve beyond the limitations of individual consciousness. The age of conquest was ending. The age of awakening had begun. And throughout the galaxy, other worlds were beginning to stir with the first whispers of planetary awareness, waiting for their own species to make the choice between transcendence and extinction. The Ruthless fleet had disappeared not because it was destroyed, but because it had evolved beyond the need for ruthlessness. In its place stood something unprecedented in galactic history, a civilization that had learned to transcend the very concepts of war and domination. The question now was whether the rest of the galaxy was ready to follow their example.